Hello, this is Sean with TWA Stories, and I have Sandy Mullen on the line right now. Sandy, how are you, and where are you located currently?
Well, we're about 3 miles from Monrovia or about 13 miles from Plainfield.
All right, so we're going to go through your TWA history, and we're going to show some of the images that it started from the beginning. And the very first one we're going to show is you when you were a child and actually with your current husband, Bill. If you could, and that's the middle shots of you at prom, and your family's there on the left, and then that's you and Bill when you were 3 years old and 6 years old. Why don't you kind of tell a little bit of this backstory and a little bit about your family?
Well, Bill and I have the fortune to have the same aunt and uncle. My dad's brother married Bill's mother's sister. We've known each other, of each other, I'll put it that way, during our lifetime. But at that time, we didn't know anybody. And Bill was looking at my dad's pictures, and he saw this one on the left, and he said, "Who are these people, Sandy?" And I said, "Well, in the front's Uncle Frank and his girlfriend, and in the back is my mom and my dad, and that's Uncle Virgil, and that little girl is me, but I don't know who that little boy is." He said, "That's me." So they took another picture of us, and there we stand, 3 and 6 years old.
That's pretty amazing that you ended up getting married. So, was there a time that you were not together and then got back together? What's kind of that story?
We were engaged when I graduated from high school. I graduated at 17, but I was going to work for an airline. I had made up my mind. I really wanted to do that, and I was not ready for marriage. So we went our separate ways, and that was in 62. And he had a family of 4. I had 2. He lost his wife in 97. My husband was killed in a motorcycle accident in 86. And we were so busy raising our kids that, but we reconnected in 2020. I'm sorry, 2000.
In 2000.
Right. And
That's
then
good.
it was just casually seeing them at the airport when he was taking one of his kids to go somewhere and so on and so forth. But in 2001, in September 11th, that was a horrible day for all airline employees. But that's when I really, we had a conversation, and he said, "You're just really upset." And I said, "I am." And he said, "Can I come to the airport?" And I told him yes. And he came, and we had coffee. And then after I got off work, we went to next door and had dinner. And that was the beginning of dating. And that was in, like I said, 2001. We were married in October.
All right, now we're going to take this all the way back to the beginning. This is your graduating class from what was it, the National School of Aeronautics in 1962?
That's right. They were located in Kansas City, and it was about a 6 weeks course. And my graduation was August 2nd, 1962, in the front row, and I'm the far left.
All right, so it looks like you had a pretty big class. Did you go directly to Indianapolis after that? And what was the original reason that you really wanted to become an airline professional, just in general? Why did you want to go into that industry?
Well, at first I wanted to fly, but when you're 5'10" and you're only 19 years old, and you put 3-inch heels on me and a hat for Trans-Texas and Lake Central, I was too tall, and I couldn't be hired because I wasn't 21 for the liquor concerns and so on and so forth. So I decided, well, I'll be a ticket agent. That'll be good for me. So I did. I hired on that December with Lake Central and worked for 2 years. And then I went to TWA in 65.
Okay, so here's a shot of you making the cover of the Indianapolis Star, and also some other of your memorabilia and pins that you'd hand out to the kids and you'd wear on your uniform. So I've heard this story, but I think it's really interesting that you also had letters essentially from the head of the Star that wrote to the head of TWA, the vice president. Kind of give us a little bit of that backstory.
Well, after the story appeared, about a week later, I got this letter, and it said that I'm indebted to William Dreyer Jr., General Manager of the Indianapolis Star, for sending me a copy of the Sunday Star magazine, which featured your picture and descriptions of your activities on behalf of TWA and its passengers. The article is a fine one, and you grace it with distinction, and in doing so, you have done TWA great service. Thank you ever so much. Sincerely, Charles C. Tillinghast Jr.
So what was that like for you, getting the letter from the VP?
Well, it was great. I mean, the ground hostess thing for that 2.5 years for me, that was the best of the best. I mean, there were other good times, and there were other learning processes. And when TWA would start something new in service, and I became a ticket agent, but there was just that ground hostess position allowed me the VIP room, the helping at the counter, and if there was a problem, like that was during the Vietnam era, and to take the family and be with them from the time their deceased serviceman was brought in until sometimes even when the hearse left with the body. They just were so happy to have somebody to hold on to and to talk to and to be sympathetic for their very distressing time.
Okay, so here's a shot again of your uniform. You currently have on your uniform. Would you like to stand up and show off the jacket?
Sure. And I can even get it buttoned.
That's great. Here's a shot of you outside of your farm and some other, let's call it swag from TWA, some sweatshirts.
Absolutely.
Now, here's a shot that I think is great of not just the planes, but it's your 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th, and 35th years of employment pin. Is that right?
That's right. 5 through 35. Yes.
So
Go ahead.
over all those years and, all that dedication, was there a lot of other people that stayed that long? And who were some of the favorite people you were able to work with?
Well, when I started with TWA, there wasn't any ticket agents openings. So they asked me if I would work in the air freight office, which I did. And Don Wilson and George Braun were most helpful. And because I was the only woman, Don Hevern from Indiana Transit, a truck driver that came for the deliveries, he christened me Sam. And from that time on, there was no more, hey, miss, girl, could you help us over here? It was Sam. And that's where that happened. And it opened the communications line between the truck drivers, the delivery people, and myself. And it was good.
Okay, so you were also able to travel. Let's talk a little bit about that. So what are some of the favorite places you were able to go, and who are some of the people you took with you? I'm assuming Bill would be at least top of the list. What are some of those scenarios?
Well, you see, my first husband and I had 2 sons. There's a picture of him and I and the 2 boys when they were quite young. But we traveled to Hawaii with the kids. We went to London, and we went through New York. Yes, the middle picture there.
Okay, so let's take a look at this. So this is your sons, and what are their names?
James, the tall one in the back is James H. Kenworthy III. That's his father, James Kenworthy Jr. And that's Michael Lee. And of course, that's me on the right. And then the picture on the right is Bill and I, my second husband.
Okay. All right. So let's just talk about travel with the family. What are some of the favorite places? Do you like to touch on them?
Well, when you have kids, you have to go to Disneyland, except Disney World. Los Angeles, we went to Boston, we went to Philadelphia, We went to Miami. Excuse me. We went to Chicago. Of course, in St. Louis, there was a lot of attraction there. I thought I'd lost my oldest son in St. Louis while we were waiting to catch an airplane to go to Los Angeles. And Michael was playing in the game room. I thought I better step with Michael. And I said, we've got to find Jimmy. All of a sudden, he was gone. And I started down the hall. Of course, the airplane's hanging overhead. And I didn't have to go but about 20 or 40 feet, maybe. And I looked to the right. And he was sitting up on the shoe shiner's stand, having his cowboy boots polished. And the guy was snapping the rag and singing a song. That's where my son went, to get his boots polished. And Michael and I, oh, there's so many funny incidences, so many.
Well, actually, what are some of the situations that you just remember that happened with TWA that made national news? Like, for instance, Flight 800, or when it was hijacked. I think there was Flight 847. What are some of those bigger situations, and how did you feel that affected the employees?
Well, Flight 100 was devastating. We had so many at first rumors and thoughts and possibilities, and I even later I bought the paperback about Flight 800, and I have since read a lot, and it's just a tragedy that happened, and many stories, but I guess only God knows.
And as far as the people you were able to work alongside, who were some of the favorite people you were able to work with, and who were some of your top mentors that helped you go, for all of those years?
Well, when I was after I did the ground hostess thing, I became a ticket agent, and Ross Byers was one of the best supervisors and one of the kindest men I think I've ever met. As far as EICs, Dave Leopard was great, Jerry Putterball, and another supervisor, Harry Williford. He was also very helpful.
So here's a shot of you behind the counter. About what year do you think this photo is?
I want to say later 70s.
Later in the 70s. So what were your responsibilities behind the counter? What things did you have to handle, and how did you also help out with maybe other positions of the people around you?
Well, on the ticket counter, as a customer service agent, you were kind of responsible for whoever was in front of you, and if someone besides you had a problem, to help them get it worked out. After the stretch of time as a ticket agent, the last 2 years I was an EIC, and I had the burgundy jacket until I married Bill and we moved, and somehow it got lost in the shuffle. But as an EIC, not only was I responsible for working the ticket counter and helping the other employees with problems, I also worked the gate area. I also worked operations, weight and balance, and just wherever there was a problem, that's where I had to go. And it was quite an experience. It was a learning experience, but it was a hands-on experience. And when we had 7 diversions at one time in Indianapolis, one of them was an international 747, and I was in operations by myself. We had one supervisor that went over to the building where we had all the overseas flights that checked in and the customs, but we couldn't do anything with them because everything was secured with the lockdown gates and so on and so forth. That was one of the hairiest nights I have ever experienced.
All right. So how about some of the maybe celebrities or key people that you were able to encounter over the years?
Oh, the VIP room was a real specialty. We had dignitaries, we had politicians, we had members of clergy, we had comedians, and we had company employees from the upper echelon when they would come in to see how we were doing. But there's just there's just so many, it's hard to tell. And from Indianapolis, the month of May is a 30-day circus because of the race and all of the equipment coming in through air freight and all of the people going back and forth. And when shipments were late or people couldn't get back and forth to test runs, it got a little hairy there at times.
All right, so here's a shot of, I believe you told me that this was your first moment of having your granddaughter greet you from flying in on a 727. And is her name Alyssa? Is that right?
It's Elisa. It's
Elisa.
Elisa with an A, yes. She was about maybe 4 to 6 weeks old. She was coming from Blythe, California with her mommy. Her dad had already moved everything here. But I met the airplane and walked on board, and they fortunately had put Tina, the mommy, and the baby up front. And oh, that was one of the most joyful moments of my life.
That's sweet. So that there's you with another woman in front of the VW bus. What's this situation, and whose VW is that?
Well, I'm not sure about whose it is, but when we were going different places on different training sessions, a lot of times they would send a bus, a car, a taxi, and we would go to our program, whether it was in Chicago or St. Louis or Kansas City or Breach Academy. That's just one of the shots, and I can't remember. I'm having a senior moment remembering where we were going.
Did you happen to know who it was with you?
No, not really.
Not the stewardess, though.
Oh, yes.
Or did she work? Did you happen to know if the ticket counter or stewardess? Do you have any idea? Nope. It's all good.
I think it was probably another ticket agent, but I'm not really sure.
All right, so here's a shot again of you and Bill at prom, and then a shot of looks like this would have been on maybe some type of clothing or whatnot with the logo. Is that what it is?
Yes, it was on a sweatshirt, and it says, "We're up to something good, employee owners of TWA." And there was another one that said, "We keep them flying."
All right, and here's a shot of your sister who passed away when she was 20. Her son Timothy, with a blown up TWA plane, and looks like a wood rocker that's also a plane. Where'd you get the wood rocker?
In Texas. That's it just we had, for our little boys, because we lived on a farm, we had tractors and trucks, but we didn't have any rocking horses. We just had rocking airplanes. And Tim will tell you, he's 54 or 56 now, that TWA was a good part of his childhood, because I had no children at the time, and I hung on to him like he was mine, and he is mine.
And you said he's now 54 years old. Is that right?
Right.
All right. So let's just talk for a little bit. So you were there 35 years. You got to experience a lot of change within the industry. What were some of the major benchmarks and things that happened with TWA internationally or nationally that really stand out?
Well, every time we got a new international flight, there was always people that were scrambling to try to figure out how. And out of Indianapolis, most of our service was through New York. But there was always competition between us and Delta, because they wanted to use Atlanta to go to Europe or wherever. But if we were going west, then it was Qantas and other carriers that would be going to, like, Australia. Those were all good times to see the growth of the company.
Now, I know that they also were very inventive with technology, even I think helping get Doppler radar off the ground. What are some of the other things with technology with TWA that really kind of stood out and set them apart from the other airlines?
Well, they were the first to adopt the Sperry automatic pilot as standard equipment to reduce pilot fatigue in 1934. The cooperation with the Goodrich Rubber Company in the development of the rubber wing de-icer and the rubber propeller de-icer overshoe. There's just so many. Was the first to develop a lightweight electrical engineer synchronization indicator, and that's now standard equipment on most equipment. Standard equipment on most airlines is what I'm trying to spit out. They were the first to operate regular all cargo service in 1935, and they were the first to fly coast to coast all cargo service, and that it was inaugurated with the Ford Trimotor, the flying boxcar. We have all kinds of boxcars now, but there was so many, just so many. They were also the first to organize airline weather department and employ a professional meteorologist, and that was in 30. Also, TWA was the first airline to conduct extensive aircraft de-icing research to determine symptomatic free air conditioning and air conditions for icing aircraft.
That's pretty impressive. What are you reading that out of?
Part of this came from my reading material on the Howard Hughes book, and part of it came on a couple of pieces that I found on, like, Paul Richter, Jack Fry, and Walter Hamilton. They were originally called the Three Musketeers of Aviation. I tell you, there is so much good stuff in history on the world of aviation, where it started, how it began, and where it's at today. Oh my goodness.
So, like, for instance, the Indianapolis airport is new compared to where you worked in the past. When you go get on a plane, when you go to an airport, because you've been in the industry for so long, what kind of goes through your mind?
Oh, first of all, where's the beautiful first class? Secondly, all of these TSA agents, I know they have to be there. I know they're responsible, but how did we ever get in this situation where they're needed? And they are needed, there's no doubt. But the first class thing, when we flew to London, Jim and I and the two boys, first class out of New York. And Michael, who at the time was about 9 or 10, the purser was a wonderful fellow. Wish I could remember his name, but he took Michael when they were getting ready to get the meal set up. And he had 2 white linen tablecloths over one little arm and 2 flowers in the other. And he would go to each of the ladies and ask to put their tablecloth on and lay a flower at the top. Well, this one lady said, I'm not ready to eat right now. Michael drew back, and he went back to the purser and told him that this lady, she didn't. He said, it's okay, Michael. He said, you talk to the ladies in this row. Well, a little bit later, the purser asked Michael, okay, Mike, he said, it's time to go tell the lady we're about to serve dinner, and we need to have her tablecloth down, and you can give her a rose. He said, as a matter of fact, you can give her 2 if you want to. So here's a little boy dressed in a suit and tie, as was his brother, about 12 years old. And he walked up to her and he said, dinner's going to be served shortly. He said, we need to prepare your table. And I guess she must have said something. And he said, ma'am, he said, dinner's going to be served shortly. And she took her book down and he put his little white tablecloth on there. And he said, and thank you for being so nice. I'm going to give you 2 flowers. So he put the flowers down and went back and told the purser, and he just roared. He took Michael upstairs in that 747 and he said, you come with me, young man. He was all over that airplane. But first class, and one time when Michael went to St. Louis and on his way to see his brother in California, and he called back and he said, Mom, he said, I'm stuck in St. Louis overnight. I said, I'm going to hop on Southwest and I'll be there. We'll get a hotel and go out in the morning. Next morning came, got in line. First class was full. And Michael came over and he said, Mom, he said, we're not going to take this one. He said, we'll just wait for the next one when first class is available. I said, excuse me? So that's when Michael had to come to the realization that he and first class might have to part friends occasionally.
Gotcha. So is there anything else you'd like to say in general and closing about your career with TWA?
Well, I guess when you know what you want to do and you're willing to do whatever it takes to do it, and you've got really nice people, and the ramp servicemen, I can't tell you how many of them helped me when I was working weight and balance. We'd have to change this, or fuel was added, or oh, there's too much fuel in this tank, and so on and so forth. And always, they were just so cooperative and so helpful. There was a pending strike, and an airplane came in, Flight 100, and I'm at the jetway, and there was nobody to wave him in. And you know how the game sometimes gets played. We don't like it, but that's how it is. And I was looking out the jetway door, or the canvas was up, and I looked around, and the captain went like this. And I said, so we waited a few more minutes, and finally he leaned up at the window and he went like this. He pointed to himself, and then he pointed to me, and he said, so I did.
All right. Well, is there anybody else that you still spend time with besides your luncheons? There are some of your closest friends that you worked with?
Oh, Janice Richardson was a dear friend. I've several other friends that have since passed away, and I do miss them. I do miss them. So it was a very good time. 40 years at the airport. What more could a girl ask for if it came from the farm?
Well, and that's a lot of flights as well. Thank you very much for your service, and I'm going to close this one out. But Sandi, just stay on the line.
I will. Thank you.
You're welcome.